I was born in Kanab, Utah in 1941, small town in southern Utah. I was named after my dad. His name was William L. Zathan Wright. I was born in the hospital in Kanab, Utah. Dr. Aiken was the doctor. He was the old family doctor that took care of everybody in the surrounding area. He was one of these old country doctors that made house calls regularly. He hardly had an office. He did house calls. And he was the only doctor that did any kind of surgery, whatever, in the surrounding area. So he was a pretty popular man. He had a lineage that went back forever, and they wrote a special book about him, Dr. Aiken's history, and I have a copy of that book that tells stories about all his life and all the experiences he's had with the Indians and all of the old timers that came to that area. I got the name buckwheat from my cousin, my aunt. I used to live next door, and I'd go over there and have pancakes, and she'd make me buckwheat pancakes. And my cousin started calling me buckwheat. And so I had buckwheat until I got my lettersman jacket in high school, and I said, we're not putting buckwheat on there, we're just putting buck on there. So it's been buck ever since. So everybody knows me by Buck. You don't know me by any other name. Well, I remember growing up, and my granddad lived up the street, and I spent a lot of time up there with him. My dad worked construction and was gone most of the time. So I spent a lot of time with my granddad Brown, and he had a workshop. He was a blacksmith, and spent a lot of time out in his shop with him and watched him do different things, make different things. People would come and need things built, and so he would work in his shop and make those things that best he could with the tools that he had to do it with. He grew a garden, a big garden. And that's where I learned to garden. I remember going out there, and he had a salt shaker sitting on the fence post. And I asked him what that was for, and he said, oh, he sprinkled that around to keep the birds out of the tomatoes. I went out there one day, and there he was with the salt shaker, the great big tomato sitting there on the bench eating that tomato. And I said, so you're the big bird, huh? So anyway, he was a great influence in my life. I learned a lot from him, learned how to garden, and today I grow a big garden from the experiences I had with him growing up. So, my grandmother had a health issue, and so she was in the hospital, and I didn't get to know my grandmother. I only saw her 3 different times that I can remember in my life. And so my grandfather was a big influence, and the things that they did with his brothers and that on weekends. I can remember they met at Uncle John's house across the street from where we lived every Sunday afternoon, and got their instruments out, and they sat and played music all Sunday afternoon. Granddad tried to teach me to get me to learn to play the mandolin and the banjo, but I had no inkling of wanting to do that. Today, I feel sorry that I didn't do that. Well, to see him today would be amazing. I'd have a lot of questions to ask that I didn't ask in the past, and a lot of things I'd like to know about him that I don't know. His family came across the plains with the pioneers. He was born in Utah, and all of his family was born in Utah except the original Ebenezer Brown that came across the plains with the pioneers. And so the whole family helped settle Utah. and southern Utah especially. So there's a lot of things that I'd like to ask, know more about what they did. In fact, I have in my backyard out here, I have the wheelbarrow that they used when they made the dam north of Kanab. They had to wheel stuff with the wheelbarrow, and I have that old wheelbarrow that they used up there. And so I'd like to know more about those things and how they survived. You know, it wasn't a good time. It was hard living. So if I'd see him today, I'd like to thank him for what I learned and what he taught me that I never had the opportunity to do before he passed. So it probably wasn't the top thing on my mind when he passed, you know. But you know, to love him and thank him for what he taught me. Ebenezer Brown came across the plains with Brigham Young. Part way across the plains, he started the Mormon Battalion, and he and his wife left their oldest daughter and son-in-law with 7 kids, and they went on the Mormon Battalion. And they brought the kids across the plains and got to Salt Lake City. A year after they were in Salt Lake City, Ebenezer and his wife came from California and met them in Salt Lake City. And from that point, then the family grew. Ebenezer was called to go back and help rescue the saints that were stranded on the plains. He wound up marrying 2 of the women that he helped rescue, and brought them back to Utah. From there, he was sent down into southern Utah to help establish that area. Down into Nevada, help establish that area. Then back to Kanab. In the Kanab Canyon, there's a little place up there called Settlers Cove. And that's where they started to settle the town of Kanab. And Brigham Young came down and told them that they had to move out of the canyon, further down, because if there's ever a flood, it would wash them out. And shortly after, they did move the town, and a flood did come. And created a big cavity down through that canyon. And that's when they went back and built the dam in the canyon so they would have irrigation water. And that's where the wheelbarrow I talked about that's where that wheelbarrow came from. And that irrigation system was there for years. Growing up, we used to swim in the old irrigation ditch. That was our swimming hole. You know, the water from the dam come down through town, and there's the ditch on the north side of town, and that's where we went swimming, in the old irrigation ditch. So. And today, because of that ditch no longer being there, the irrigation company come in and put in pipes and all of that, eliminated that ditch. Every time it rains up there, the hard rain now, the streets of Kanab flood. And the old timers tried to tell them, don't take the ditch out, because if you do, we're going to have problems. And ever since then, you get a heavy rain that comes down out of those canyons and it floods the streets of Kanab. And that's where the Brown family all grew from there. That was my great-great-grandfather. My mom was working at the Grand Canyon as a maid, doing rooms, and my dad was out there at the Conservation Service doing construction at the Grand Canyon, and that's how they met. They met out there. Well, they were hard workers, very easygoing. they didn't, back then we didn't have a lot. And so they worked for, you worked for what you had, and you shared, and you took care of one another. So they were very easygoing parents. And they were there for us to support us and help us, but they taught us that, you had to do a lot on your own. You couldn't be handed things, you had to work for them. Well, Dad was actually born in Texas, in a little town called Happy, Texas, which is a railroad town. Had one little main street. It was a railhead for the ranchers and the cotton people, farmers around there. Dad left and moved to Arizona with the Conservation Service, build roads and dams in southern Utah and northern Arizona. Shortly after the CCs left the area, Dad went to work for the government and came to Arlington, Arizona, which is just west of Phoenix. And we were there for about a year. Mom got homesick, so they moved back to Kanab. And that's where we wound up living the rest of my life. Till I left home, that's where I was, in Kanab. And Dad worked road construction and worked in the logging camp out on the North Kaibab. Started his own painting business and did that for years. Worked construction at the Glen Canyon Dam. When that was finished, then he went back to painting, and that's what he was doing until he retired. He loved to hunt and fish. We did a lot of hunting and fishing together. He was always there. If I needed something, I could go to him, and he was always there to support me in whatever I wanted to do. Football games, sports at school, he was always there when he could be there, but he was very supportive. He was always there, and I remember, some tough times that I had to go to him and tell him some things that I didn't like to do, but he was there and supported me. So he was a very supportive man. Dad was a very handy man. He very mechanical, did all of his own mechanical work, and the old cars that we had, we worked on and repaired, and he taught me how to repair and whatever. In fact, the first car I ever drove was a 1931 Chevrolet that we had rebuilt, and that was the family car. And from there were several different cars up through the years, but Dad taught me how to work on vehicles and mechanics and that. So as I grew up, I did all my own mechanic work. He taught me how to paint. I worked with him in the painting business and was able to work on different jobs, painting. So he taught me a lot of things that I could do myself, and I still do today, the things that I was taught. The best piece of advice Dad gave me was always to work hard, be straightforward, and be honest. And if you work hard, then you benefit from your work. And that's growing up, doing that, that's where I got to where I'm at today, is because of hard work. Teaching me how to work with my hands, hard work has always paid off. And he was a hard worker. And so those are the things that he instilled in our minds, that's what we needed to do, is to work hard, be straightforward, be honest about it, give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, and it'll pay off for you. Well, if I'd see Dad again today, I'd love to tell him thanks for all of the things that he taught me. I still have a lot of questions that I'd like to have answered, but won't be able to get those answers till I see him again. But those are the things that I'd like to thank him for. Well, my mother was a member of the church, and as we grew up as kids, we always went to church, and we were all members of the church. Dad was not a member of the church. And sad to say, the missionaries came and was teaching Dad, and he was going to be baptized. And at the last visit that they came, they looked him right in the eye and they told him, he said, you know, you're going to be baptized and you're going to become a member of the LDS church, and the rest of your family's going to hell. And that was all it took. He showed him the front door, and he never let him back in the house again. You know, that happened, and Dad escorted him out of the house, and that was fine. You know, Mom and Dad got along fine. She understood what had happened, and unfortunately, I was there. I understood what happened, and there was no turning back. They'd made their decision, and Dad never was a member of the church until we did his work after he passed away. We did my dad's work in the Mesa Temple, and then we did the sealing of my mom and dad in the Raleigh, North Carolina Temple when we were back there visiting with my daughter and her family. And that was a very neat thing to be able to seal them together. Felt very good to know that the work had been done for my dad and that he was all part of our family now, and we was all sealed together. So that was a very neat, humbling experience to be able to do that. My dad not being a member of the church, after the incident with the missionaries, I decided that if he's not going to be a member of the church, then there's no point in me being a member of the church. And I quit going to church. I wasn't active for a long, long time after that. I was about 16 years old, I guess, when that happened. So, like I say, I quit going to church and went down the other road. So, and that wasn't always good. You know, I started doing things that the church didn't, recognize and that, but eventually I got back after I got married and started having kids, and the kids were going to church, and so we got back into the church and grew from there. Not being active in the church caused a lot of hardship. My wife and kids would go to church, and I would not go. And it became time. My wife was not a member of the church, but she grew up in a small town and went to church and participated in all the church activities and that. And when it come time for my daughter and oldest son to be baptized, she was going to be baptized. And so it decided it was time that I got back into church and got to where I was able to go and baptize them as members of the church. And since that point, we've been very active in the church. My mom was a homemaker. She worked in the home. She had a regular routine every week. Monday morning was laundry day, and I can remember coming home at lunchtime at school, and the washing machine was in the kitchen, and she was doing laundry. And with Monday at lunch, it was always beans and cornbread. That was just a normal routine. And Tuesdays was ironing day. You come home at lunchtime, and she'd be doing her ironing. And so she did all the cooking, baking, and that. she spent her life just taking care of the family and until after my dad passed away, and then she went to work. But up until then, she was there for us kids and always wrote Christmas cards, always sent money for birthdays. Her big thing was Christmas time. Everybody got a big box of candied popcorn. That was handed down, and my daughter today, that's her thing, is making grandma's popcorn. But she was very religious. She went to church and participated in all the church activities. And after my dad passed away, the church members and in the neighborhood there was there to take care of her and see that she had what she needed, because those kids had all grown and left, but she was well known in town. Everybody knew her. And she wrote poems about some of the people in town and the neighbor kids, and that the neighbor lady across the street made a book with all of her poems, and we have that now. She would write poems and put them in the local newspaper about different people, different things, and so she was well known in town. But she was very much a mother that took care of the family, a family mother. My mom was very persnickety about how we looked. You know, she ironed our clothes to the T, wouldn't let us wear anything unless it was clean and ironed, except in the summertime. When school was out in the summertime, the clothes came off and we'd run around barefoot in a pair of shorts. That was it all summer long. And I'm suffering the consequences of some of those things today because of being out in the sun like that. But she was very loving, very careful about what she said to people and how she treated her family. And the grandkids all love Grandma Wright, and they still talk about her today. So my relationship with my mom was real good. When we put her in a rest home, had to put her in the rest home. It was the hardest thing we had to do. I remember prior to that, a friend of mine, the chief of police up there, called me one day and said, "Buck, we got to take your mom out of the car." And I said, "Well, okay, what's the issue?" And he said, "Well, you know, she goes up to senior center every week for lunch." "Yeah." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, the senior center is just north of the hospital." I said, "Yeah." "Well, she comes down that street." "Yeah, I understand." "Well, here's the issue." He said, "You know, we have to land a helicopter there in that street to air-evac people out of the hospital." And she came down the street the other day, and we had a helicopter there, and she just almost hit the helicopter and ran over the police officer. So he said, "We got to take her out of the car." And I said, "Okay, I'll come up and we'll get it taken care of." So we went up with my brother and sister, sat her down and talked to her and said, here's what's got to happen, and here's the reason why. And I explained to her, what had happened. And she said, "Well, they can take the damn helicopter down to the airport. They don't need to park it in the middle of town." So at that point in time, we had to take her driver's license away from her and get rid of her car. And shortly after that, we had to put her in a rest home. And she had a very difficult time with that, until one day we just went up and said, "We have to do it." And we took her over to a friend's to visit. We moved her stuff out of the house out to the rest home and took her out to the rest home. And she says, "Oh, I guess this is where I'm going to live." And I said, "Yep, well, you made it like my home, so I'll be happy here." And she was. And she was there until she passed away. Well, if I saw her today, I'd like to tell her how much I missed her, thank her for all the things she did. And tell her I'm sorry for being a little brat that I was, because I did cause some problems. But that's what I'd like to tell her. Now, my mom was a quilter. She loved to make quilts. And she made quilts for all of the grandkids when they were born. And then when they graduated from high school or got married, she had a quilt for them. And growing up, on weekends, in the fall, when the pine nuts were coming off of the pine trees out on the mountain, it was a Sunday afternoon adventure to go out and pick up pine nuts. And she loved to do that. And she'd always go out after we left home, and we'd always get a little package of pine nuts that she would send along with the popcorn at Christmas time. So those were some of the things she did. But the kids still have her quilts today, and my grandkids, some of them still have their little blankets that she gave them when they were born, and some of them are just ragged and torn. They're put away in Ziploc bags that they still use today. When they get sick or ill, they want Grandma's blankets. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. Sister lives in California, brother lives in Las Vegas. My sister lost her husband with COVID, the first go around of COVID, but she's doing well. And my brother was a mortician till he retired. He ran all the mortuaries in Las Vegas. He's retired now and doing well. So they all have family, and the kids are all doing good. They seem to be very happy. Growing up, me and my sister didn't get along very good. I think she was spoiled, and she getting things that I didn't have, and made me mad. So we had several disagreements and arguments and whatever, and I'll never forget the one day she picked up the butcher knife and took after me in the kitchen with the butcher knife, and that kind of stopped having arguments. That Dad put his foot down then and said, "Okay, that's enough of that." So after that, we started getting along pretty well. Oh yeah, she'll tell you stories about that. But my brother, he was younger, and he was very athletic. He was in track and basketball and football and baseball, and so we did a lot of things together, especially when we were real young. When like I said earlier, we played down off the creek bank, hauling sand and digging tunnels and rubber gun fights over at the old movie barn, and we did a lot of things together, and we still get along good today. We talk quite regularly. Now, when we was growing up, and the flood that had come down through Kanab in the earlier day created a great big wash. And down off in that wash, there was different colors of sand. We used to take our wagons and go down there and make roads, and haul that sand back up and make forts, dig tunnels, and we played down in their creek all the time. Had rubber gun fights and all of those things down in there. And we had to make our own entertainment. I can remember finally getting old enough to go to the movies. And we worked it out with the guy at the owner of theater that if we come down there after school and sweep the floors and clean up, he would give us a movie ticket. So that's how we got to go to the movies. So we gathered pop bottles. I can remember going along the highway on our bikes, riding our bikes, picking up pop bottles, taking them back up to the grocery store, and they give us a penny a bottle. And we take that money and go up to the Kanab Equitable, and old man Ackerman up there had a big row of bins that had candy in it. So we could go up there and pick out our candy, but we made our own entertainment. And I can remember the funny part is the candy we liked was the licorice. And you can see the old men uptown chewing tobacco and spitting, so we'd buy the licorice and put it in their mouth and go uptown and spit on the sidewalk, just like the old men did. So that was one of our things, that we did. We created our own entertainment. Well, I can remember going to school. I started kindergarten, and it was a great big class. There was a lot of kids there. And I got out of kindergarten, and we got into first grade. Mrs. Peterson was our teacher. And they had a program there to teach us how to read, how to write. And you had to pass each one of those steps as going through school in order to get out of the first grade and go to the second grade. And you go to the second grade, then you learned a little bit more. And the school there was very particular how they taught the kids. You didn't get to go to the next grade in school if you didn't pass the grade that you were in. It's too bad they don't do that with the kids today. It's really sad. But you learned how to read and write. You learned about math. You learned about the government. You learned about all of those things in grade school. And then that went on into high school. But you had to pass your classes in order to move on. And they don't do that today, sorry to say. When I was 12 years old, the milkman used to come from Cedar City, Utah to Kanab to deliver milk. His name was Carlile As. And I got acquainted with him, and so I used to meet him after school. And back in those days, the milk was put under the meat case in the meat department. They didn't have big dairy cases. And my job was to get on my hands and knees and belly underneath there and pull all the old milk out, put the new milk in, and then put the old milk in front of the new milk so it was rotated. And he'd go stock ice cream. I'd get all that done, and we'd go to the next stop. And so I used to do that. And got quite acquainted with Carlile over the years. When I went to work for Shamrock, he was buying product from Shamrock because he had the contract out on the reservation to supply milk to the schools out there. And so I got acquainted with him even more then, and stayed acquainted with him up until 2 years ago. Carlile was 97 years old, and we were staying at the Comfort Inn in Kanab, and went down to have breakfast, and lo and behold, Carlile come wheeling in the kitchen area there, still delivering milk, 97 years old. So I went over and got him, and of course we had quite a conversation, if you do Carlile. But Carlile delivered milk until he's 98 years old. And everybody in town knew Carlile. Everybody in the area knew Carlile. And he was just a good old milkman. He just had a heart for everybody. So everybody loved Carlile. And I also raised rabbits back in my younger days, 12 years old. An old man named Joe Woolley had a big rabbit farm about a block from our house, and I used to go and help him. And he says, well, you need to raise rabbits. So he gave me $1 and a dough, and we built some hutches and started raising rabbits. Well, rabbits multiplied. And so we made a deal with the market, and they're in town to kill rabbits and sell rabbit meat, and that got to be a pretty good thing. And we did that for quite a while, and then I got tired of it. And I had to get up every morning and go feed the rabbits. Every night I had to go feed the rabbit, clean out the hutches and whatever. And one morning I got up and I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. And Mom said, well, you got to feed the rabbits. And I said, okay, fine. And I went down and opened all the hutches and let all the rabbits out. That was the end of the rabbit business. I had neighbors had rabbits everywhere, in their gardens and everywhere. But that was the end of my rabbit business. The neighbors were not happy. They were in the gardens and everywhere else. But I said, if you want to shoot them and eat them, that's fine. They're yours if they're in your yard. So, but I had some prize rabbits. We went to county fair. I got blue ribbons and that from having the best rabbits and whatever. So that was another little job that I did. I worked in service stations. They built a big service station there in town of Newlyweds, toward the old Heaton homestead down on the corner, and built a big Phillips station there. Ken Smith used to live in Dragerton, Utah, bought the property, built the service station. That's about the time that the dam was going. They was building power lines and stuff going out to the dam. So I got a job repairing truck tires. So that was my job. Every night those truckers would come in and they'd have flat tires, and I'd work until I got all the tires repaired so they could pick them up the next day. And that was quite an experience. Had a special cage for the tires when you aired them up, because they had lock rings on them. And had to put the tires in the cage in case that ring came off. And we had another guy that was working there too, and he was helping me one night. And he got in a big hurry and he didn't put the tire in the cage, put the air to it, and blew the rock ring off and cut a perfect hole right through the ceiling of that service station. So that was some of my younger experiences. Growing up, when we got a little bit older and had bicycles, Three Lakes is 7 miles north of Kanab, and there's 3 lakes up there. And we used to ride our bikes up to 3 Lakes, 7 miles, and swim. Then we'd ride our bikes back home. But the big lake up there doesn't have a bottom in it. They've never found the bottom of that lake. But that used to be the area swimming hole for everybody, the big swimming hole. So it's all fenced off now and owned by a private company, and you don't go swimming there anymore. But it's right still on the highway. You can see it every time you go by. So it was a good old swimming hole. They used to have dances up there on the weekends. They used to have the big concrete slab somebody had poured up there, and they used to have dances there at 3 Lakes years ago. Yeah, they'd bring bands in there, local bands that go up and play, and they just have a real good time there at the lake. If somebody got a little bit too full, they'd throw them in the lake. So. High school sports, I started out as a equipment manager on the basketball team. And I never did play basketball, but then I played baseball. Played shortstop on the baseball team 1 year. Football, I played football 3 years as a running back. And, to get a letterman's jacket, you had to participate in sports at school. And of course, that was one of the main activities of the school was the football, basketball, baseball, track. They had a drama class there, but I didn't ever participate in drama. I wasn't that kind of a guy, so I didn't ever participate in that. But I still have my letterman's jacket that I got back in 1960. One memory about football was the old football field at the school, and up on a hill was a telephone pole. And to run, you had to make laps up that hill and back down around that telephone pole 10 times every practice. That's how you warmed up, was run up the hill and down 10 times, and that was your practice. And it was brutal, absolutely brutal. By the time you were done making the laps up around the hill, you didn't want to practice football. You were done for the day, but you still had to go ahead and practice. Of course, baseball, we had a baseball diamond down what they call the lane, down south of town. It wasn't up at the school. And we had to build that diamond in order to have a field to play with, a big old field, and so we had to make a diamond out there. So the team had a farmer there that had a tractor with a scraper on it, and they scraped the field off, and we made a diamond and put the backstops up, and that's where we played baseball. And it wasn't the best of diamonds, but we had a baseball diamond. It was fun, but like I said about football, we had people come and going all the time, so we didn't know whether we was going to have a regular team or not have a regular team. So as far as games go, there wasn't any really great games. We either win or lost, and sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't so good, So we played football, and we had a lot of fun playing football, but we didn't have no championship teams. My friends in school were kind of shirt-tail relatives, some of them. And like I say, Marvin Button and Philip Parks and Seymour Parks and some of the other guys that I run around with. We were all very good friends, and we did things together, got in trouble together, got out of trouble together. But I still used to I think there's only a few of them left. They've all passed on. But there's still a lot of good memories of the fun that we had, the things that we did. When I was about 12 years old, Marvin's dad is a construction guy, and he built a lot of fence. Some of us guys used to work for him putting jiggers in the fence. He'd pay us a penny a jigger, and that was a lot of money back then. You put in 500 pennies, 500 jiggers a day, or 600 jiggers a day. That's a lot of money. But I grew up learning how to work with them and build miles and miles and miles of fence. Worked on other projects with them. The guys that I run around with, of course, we all went to church, and some of them were real religious, some of them weren't. But I stayed in contact with several of them over the years. I'd go up and visit. I'd go by and visit with them. But most of them moved away. A lot of them moved away because there was no work there. And so when they'd have class reunions, we'd go up to those class reunions, renew our acquaintance and talk about old times and have a good time. But Most of the guys that I went to school with, like I say, they moved different directions, and so that's about the only time we would see her. It'd be when we go back up there for reunions or different functions. So, but we were there to help one another and support one another and get in trouble with one another. My high school years was good. We were wild. We did a lot of things that we probably shouldn't do. And we had an English teacher that we just hated. And she'd get in her car, and every time she started her car, she'd just rev that engine just as hard as it'd go. And I remember one day we said, we got to do something about that. So a friend of mine lived next door, and his dad was the postmaster and the bishop. But anyway, we went over there and got some great big potatoes and shoved them up her exhaust pipe as far as we could shove them with a broom handle. And then we went and hid in the bushes next door until she got out of school. And she got in that car and just goosed it, and it went boom! Blew all the exhaust out from under the car. And that's the last time she got in that car and goosed it. They got it fixed, and she never did do that again. And her name was Mrs. Riggs. Well, growing up, the trucks used to come through Kanab hauling watermelons from Arizona up to Utah. And they'd stop at the Premium Oil gas station there to fuel up their trucks. And we could always tell when they was a load of watermelons. So we'd gather up and we'd go up, get somebody's car, go up on the sand, which is just about 10 miles north of Kanab. Big old steep sandy road. But it wasn't sand, it was blacktop. But those old trucks would just slow down to a crawl, and we'd just jump out of the car and run up, get in the back end of the truck, and throw watermelons over to the guys in the back or off to the side of the road. So the truckers, they kind of got to, missing the watermelons, and they couldn't figure out where they were losing them. And so one day, a friend of mine's dad had bought a brand new Studebaker truck. We got in that truck and went up to get watermelons, and we were standing in the back of the truck throwing them over the hood of the pickup into the back of the truck, and that old trucker just slammed on the brakes and stopped. We ran the brand new pickup in the back end of the truck, and there we were. We done got caught. And of course we had to answer to Quimby's dad what happened to the front of his brand new Studebaker truck. So that kind of ended the watermelon chasing. So then we decided, well, okay, if we can't get watermelons off the trucks, we'd find out who was raising watermelons in town. And there was an old bachelor down in the middle of town that had a big old garden and grew watermelons along the side of the fence. So we'd go down and he'd sneak these watermelons out from under the fence. We did that for quite a while, and one night we went down and got a bunch of watermelons. Unbeknownst to us, he'd gone down and shot Epsom salts in those watermelons. And needless to say, that was the end of stealing his watermelons. What it caused us for about a week gives you the shits. So we had to get even with old Si. So we went down, and he had an outhouse about 50 yards from his house. And we slid the old outhouse back so that when he'd get up in the middle of the night, he would go down there and use it. Well, old Si got up in the middle of the night, went down there to use it, and fell down in the hole. And he stayed in the hole until the neighbors heard him screaming the next morning. They couldn't figure out what was wrong, and they went over and found old Si down there in the trap. So that was just one of the mischievous things that we did growing up. We had to make our own entertainment. A friend of mine's dad was a construction worker over at Button. And he was building the movie The Greatest Story Ever Told. in Kanab, and he was doing a bunch of construction work, and they had to do some explosions. And so down in his shed, he had these boxes of dynamite, 3 sticks of dynamite. So we'd been out rabbit hunting one day, and we decided, we ought to have some fun. Go get some of that dynamite and see if we could set it off. So we went down and got a case of dynamite. These were 3-inch sticks. Yeah.
How long were they?
3 like this.
Oh my goodness.
Down in a little draw down there, and lined that dynamite up on the ledge. Started shooting it with their 22s. It wouldn't go off, so we went into town and got a .6 and went out. One shot, and it went off, and that whole ledge come down. Oh, I mean, it was an explosion like you wouldn't believe. And that ledge just came right out at us. We just jumped in the Jeep and went down through the pass there, down into Fredonia. Went into the service station to get us a drink, and everybody was talking about the big explosion, and they was trying to figure out what happened. We got a drink. A guy come in from Kanab and said, that explosion broke some windows in Kanab. So we got in the Jeep and we left. We went back out rabbit hunting. And to this day, I don't think they know who set off the dynamite. So the stories that are kept secret. But it was fun. Like I said earlier, with some of the entertainment we had to make for ourselves. Another time we took an old wagon and disassembled it, hoisted it up, put it on top of the schoolhouse, reassembled it. And that stayed up there for months. People couldn't figure out how that wagon got up on the schoolhouse. But they finally found out who put it up there, and so they made us go take it down and take it off the schoolhouse. So those are just some of the things we did for entertainment. Well, I met my wife. She lived in Fredonia, and that was south of the border. They were border bums as far as we was concerned. And but anyway, the girls from Fredonia would come to Kanab to go to work. They'd work in restaurants and stuff up there as waitresses. And she was dating some guys, but she was working in the restaurant there, and me and a couple of my buddies went in there one night to have something to eat, and she was working. And so on a bet, they asked me to ask her out. I said, I bet you don't dare. So I asked her out, and she accepted. She got off work. We went up to a party at her house, and it happened to be her old boyfriend's house. When we left to go on a date, she knew where we was going. We was going to that party. So she wasn't too enthused about it, but that's where we went. And of course, we got to the party and everybody's saying, oh no, so, but that's the way it worked out. We kept dating. At that point in time, I was working at Glen Canyon Dam. And, so I was working the night shift, so I'd leave at 8 o'clock at night, and we'd drive out there. It had to be to work at midnight. And we'd drive out and go to work, and I'd get off the next morning, come home, run around a little bit, go to bed, get up at night, and go back to work. So we didn't see a whole lot of each other except maybe on weekends. So, but we still dated, wound up getting married. Well, she was going to school at NAU down in Flagstaff. So sometimes I'd get off work after I got off the night shift. I'd drive to Flagstaff, spend the weekend, and I'd drive back to Kanab so I could go back to work. So it all worked out. Jamie's my rock. I depend on her for a lot of things, probably more than what I should, but she's been there through everything, every issue, problem I've had, she's been there to talk to, and we've been able to work things out and do things together, and I love her to death. I don't know what to do without her. And when we were dating, she was still in high school, so they had their annual Halloween party. And I had dated a couple of other gals, but this one particular gal, her mom didn't like me at all. She didn't want me anywhere around. So anyway, I went to the school dance dressed as a rodeo clown, and just had a real good time. Danced with everybody, just had a real good time. Danced with that other gal's mom a couple of times, danced with her a couple of times. Just had a real good time. Danced with Jamie, just had a real good time with the dance. And nobody but Jamie knew who I was until after the dance was over and they found out, and man, they didn't like that at all. But that was just one of the things that we did. When I got out of high school, the first year that I was out, I worked in the logging camp as a choker setter and a knot bumper on the loader. When winter set in, they shut the logging camp down, and I went Flagstaff to the union hall down there, and got me a union card. And my dad was very familiar with the union people there, knew them personally. The head guy there at the union hall went into the order desk to see if there's any work orders for the day, and they said, yeah, there were some, and he said, we'll take one of them off. I've got a guy for the job, so they did that. I drove back to Page, went to Kanab, back to lunch, went back out to the office at the employment office at the dam, got my paperwork and got my shift schedule, and went to work at midnight that night. My first job was below the dinky trestle where the train came out and dumped the concrete into the buckets that went over the dam, and they had a siren up there, and when that siren went off, that meant that the guy on the dinky trestle on the train had missed the bucket, and the concrete was coming over the edge of the dam, over the edge of the wall. And me and two other guys were working right down underneath there, and here these big rocks, concrete, came down into where we were working, and we had to hide up against the wall, against some scaffolding to keep from getting hit. And that was my first night on the job. And from there, I got put on what they call a washout crew. The swamper on the washout crew, and that's where after they sandblast the concrete and put the cooling pipes in, and that all has to be washed out, and blowed dry and taken care of until such times they can put the grout down and start pouring the concrete. So I was on that crew for about 6 months, and I got an opportunity to move to the day shift on the high scaling crew. My dad knew the superintendent of the high scalers, so he got me a job over there on the high scaling crew, and I was taught how to be a high scaler. Climb down over the edge of the wall and put in pins and whatever needed to be done on the walls. And I did that for about 1.5 years. And then I got transferred to a bull crew. We went around and did all kinds of different jobs. Hauled oxygen acetylene bottles to different places. Did road work in town, patching holes in the streets, just all kinds of odd jobs. Then I got put on the sandblast crew, blasting pipe pipe that came in was coated, and that all that coating had to be blasted off before they could use it. So I got me and a boy by the name of Sid Sullivan. Sid was my swamper. And I did the blasting, and he kept the sand pot full. I did that for about 6 months. Then I got transferred from there out to the wall weep at the aggregate plant. Loading trucks on a hopper. They had a big drag line that loaded this big hopper full of aggregate, and the trucks would come underneath, and I'd push the button and open the gate, fill the trucks, and push the button and shut them and go on. I did that for 18 months without a day off, working nights, and then I got transferred from there to the paint crew.
Tell me about that. How did that happen?
Well, I'll have to think about that for a minute.
I remember.
Do you remember? Well, tell them about it.
You had to get a box out of the glove compartment.
That's right. I'd put the ring in the glove compartment. I remember that.
I
Yeah.
heard this story. Talk a little bit about, how you asked her to marry you.
Well, she was a very sweet gal and very intelligent, going to school, and I just kind of got to liking her, The more we was around each other, I said, finally decided, hey, we ought to get married, And like I said, she was going to school, and so I went down one weekend, and we went and bought a ring. And so after we bought the ring, and I went back down the following week to see her, I'd put the ring in the glove compartment in a box. And we were riding around, and we went up to City Park and stopped, and I said, box in the glove compartment, get that box out. And so she got the box out, and I said, open it. So she opened it, and I said, well, do you want to marry me? There's your ring. And she accepted, and from that point on, it's history. Yeah, very romantic.
He is a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Typical.
Yeah.
I think he did say you love me in there somewhere.
Okay, our wedding day was a special day because we were able to get all of our families together, all of our friends together, and celebrate this special day. Well, we got married in the church in Fredonia, Arizona. A friend of mine's dad was the bishop in Kanab, and he came down, Claude Glazier. He came down and married us. We had a reception there in the church hall. Our friends had just got married. 2 other couples that we run around with had just got married, and so we thought that was the proper thing to do. We if they're going to get married, we need to get married if we're going to run around with them. So that was a very special day. And it took off, and it went to Zion National Park, where we spent our first night, and then from there we went to Las Vegas, spent a couple of nights in Las Vegas, and then we went back, and I had to go to Utah, Salt Lake, for my Army exam to go in the service. So we went up there for that, and I took my physical and failed the physical, and so we went back to Kanab and went back to work. We were already engaged when I got the notice that I could be drafted, and I had a report date, and we had already set the wedding date, and so we decided we'd just go ahead and get married, and went up for the physical, and like I say, I didn't pass the physical because of the cancer that I'd had. That word was enough to, you're out of here. I was free to go. And that was quite a relief because all my friends, a lot of my friends were being drafted. A lot of them weren't coming back, only in a box. And so I didn't feel bad at all about not having to go. So the early marriage was, there were 3 couples got married at the same, within months of one another. We all ran around together, had a good time and did things together. But I worked and she worked, and you just both had to work to make ends meet. That's all there was to it. And but it all worked out. We lived in Kanab for a while, and then we moved to Flagstaff. The old Clark homes was a bunch of Quonset huts that was put in there by the military. And it was ironic that after we got married and moved to Flagstaff, that's the first place we lived, was in those Clark homes. And then we went from there. We lived there for a while. We lived in another old house that we fixed up. We got it all fixed up, and the guy that owned it decided he wanted to sell it, so we had to find another place to live. Found a duplex that we lived in for a while, and we finally decided, we need to have our own place. So we went out and we found a lot where they was building some homes, and bought a lot and built our first home in Flagstaff. So I could go to school, and I worked down there. I went there, and the first job I had, I worked for the highway department, plowing snow in the wintertime. And from there, I got a job with the police department, going to school, worked on the police department, left the police department, and worked for a friend in the service station for a while. And the company, Medigold Dairy, was having their truck service there, and I got to talking to the guy and told him that I had worked with a milkman when I was growing up younger, and he said, well, come and ride with me. And so I went and rode with him. Put my application in. He took the application to Phoenix, turned it in, and waited and waited and waited, and he come back and he said, well, I don't know whether we're going to hire you or not, because we've had ex-police officers work for us before, and they didn't work out, so we'll wait and see. And I said, okay. It went on for about a month, and then he come in and he said, well, I'm going to hire you whether they want to hire you down there or not. So I went to work on the ice cream truck, delivering ice cream in northern Arizona. And then that company was bought out by Shamrock Foods Company, and I went to work for them and spent 39 years there and retired. Come home one day and I thought, what in the world's gone on here? Stuff all over the front yard where we lived. I thought, well, something's happened. She was getting ready to make a cake, and the floor furnace was right there, and the cushion had fell off on the floor furnace and smoked the house up, and the fire department came and threw it out, so I accused her of burning the cake. That didn't go over very big. So, but those are just some of the things that experiences that we had, but we did well. So we moved from that little apartment down to another apartment down the end of the street. That was kind of a step up in life, It was a 2-bedroom apartment, nice and roomy, and right next to the down the street from the hospital and 3 doctors right next door to us, so we thought we'd really moved uptown. That was good. When we moved to Flagstaff, that was the reason for me to move to Flagstaff, was to go to school. So we enrolled in school and went to school, and then I got a job on the police department because I was studying police science. And so I got a job on the police department, and I worked at the police department while I was going to school. I was in the police department for 4 years. It was a rough job. So we were starting to have the riots in California and so on and so forth, and that was flowing over into Phoenix and into Flagstaff, and we had issues there, and we had a couple of near riots there, but that all got stopped one night when one of the officers I was with got stabbed and in a bar, and he lived next door to the chief of police, and the chief of police came down with his car parked in the street, and the street was just full of colored people, and he just opened the trunk of his car, got an Uzi out, let off about 20 rounds in the air, and says, "Now, you all go home, or I'm going to stack you up like cardwood." And that stopped it. We didn't have any more problems with the folks there. But I wrecked a patrol car one night going to an armed robbery. Young man run the light, and I hit him broadside doing about 80 miles an hour, and totaled a brand new patrol car. Broke my neck, but I didn't know that it was broken for about 5 years after that. I went to a chiropractor after we had moved to Phoenix, and he says, "Well, I need to x-ray your back and that before I do any work on it." And he x-rayed it, and he came out, and he said, "When did you break your neck?" I said, "Didn't know I was broke." And he said, "Oh yeah, let me show you." He says, "You were a time bomb for over a year." He said, "If somebody had hit you in the back, you'd have been dead." So, had several entrances that were kind of hectic. We had a fight one night. A gal put a high heel shoe down through my cheek. And another time we got a phone call that a guy that we had arrested and put in jail had been released from jail in Phoenix, and he was on his way back to Flagstaff to kill me and the sergeant that had put him in jail. So that was a neat experience. We waited at the bus station for him, and the bus got there, and he got off the bus, and we arrested him again and locked him up, and he went to the state penitentiary for that. So those are kind of some of the fun things that happened while I was working for the police department. I left the police department because I had locked the mayor's son up for drunk driving on 2 different occasions within about a 2-week period. And they wanted me to drop the charges, and I wouldn't drop the charges, so I resigned from the police department and went on my merry way. Being a police officer is not a thankful job, okay? And you're there to protect the people. You take an oath to protect the people, and when you're not able to do that because of politics that gets involved in your way, then it's a job that it's a thankless job, and it teaches you that politics doesn't need to be in the realm of public safety at all. Well, I think our place on earth is to have a family. And you look around at those that don't have families and the things they do and the hardships that they have because they don't have that love and joy that you get by having a family. And so I think it's vitally important that you have a family, and that family supports you and you support them. Well, I was growing up footloose and fancy free and got married, and that kind of calmed me down a little bit. And then after Kim was born and we started having a family, then things got serious, that you had a bit heavier responsibility then to take care of them and be sure that they had what they needed as they grew up, and to take care of them. So that responsibility made me grow, made me try to do better than what I had been doing growing up. And because of that, I think we've got a real strong family, and we look out for one another. Well, if I had them all in the same room, I guess I'd just go around and tell each one of them how proud I am of them, of what they've become, and how they've treated, their families have grown, and how they've matured in their lives, and the accomplishments that they've made, and how much we love them because of what they've done. Well, our kids have been great kids. They've been trouble-free kids. They've been well behaved. They, of course, like all kids, they get into a little bit of mischief, but they've all been very good growing up, not into trouble. They did well in school. They've done well since they've been out of school. They've all got families that we're proud of and they're proud of, and they've all done well for themselves. So we're proud of all of them. Okay, we'd been married about 2 years, and came home from work, and Jamie hadn't been feeling good, and we found out that she was pregnant. We went through that pregnancy, and she had some difficulty. Kim was born early. Hospital was a block up the street from our house. And we went there. She had the baby, had Kim, and Kim was not getting along good. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, so we airvac'd her to the Cottonwood Hospital in Cottonwood, Arizona, Dr. Wright. And he met us at the airport, and on the way to the hospital, he told us what was wrong with her. And we went there and got her hooked up to IVs and stuff. She was dehydrated, and she was in the hospital there for 2 weeks, and we brought her home. Kim's a very mature, very special, motherly, caring person. She cares about everybody. She'll do anything for anybody at any time, drop whatever she's doing. She's there for whatever needs to be done. She'll give of her time. She's very heavily involved in the church and gives there all the time. She's a seminary teacher. But she is very loving and very tender, very soft-hearted. She's just a wonderful person. Growing up, she had her own room. She did her own things, and she was very neat, very particular. Everything had to be in order all the time. And that was good. And she helped her mother all the time with the housework and whatever. When she started dating, going out, and then that became another issue. And we bought her a car. She was working, and we had bought her a car, and she was one of very few kids that had a car, so she hauled everybody everywhere. And they used to go to church dances down in the middle of Phoenix on Saturday nights. And she worked at a nursing facility. And so after she'd get off work, she would go to those dances. Well, this one Saturday night, she didn't come home. And we waited and we waited and we waited. And so I got in the car to drive down to find her. And there had been an accident down in the area where she was supposed to be. And they had the roads all closed. And they wouldn't let anybody in there. So I didn't know that she was in the accident or not. So I waited and I waited and I waited. And I finally came home and she was home. And at that point in time, she got a scolding about, if you're going to go to the dance, that's fine. But you let us know, and you have a time to be home. And that's when you're supposed to be home. And so that was one time that I had to get on her. And the other time was I was out of town. She was dating. And I always tried to communicate, when I'd be home and so on and so forth. And Jamie would get after me if I didn't call and let her know. And so this one particular night I was headed home and I called and the line was busy. And so I drove a few more miles and got stopped again and caught on a payphone and called and the line was busy. So I had drove all the way from Yuma to Phoenix and the line was busy. And I got home and there's Kim still on the telephone talking to her boyfriend. And so you can imagine what I had to say about that. So, and she's never forgot that. We've had a lot of good moments, loving moments, and when their kids were born, and the things that we've been able to do with them, and be with them, and go back when they live back east, and go on vacation, and she always loved to have us come. And we've had some real special moments together. Well, when her one son had to go to have brain surgery, we were back there and we spent numerous hours with her in the hospital. And those were very special times to watch her and see her concern and how she felt and how she depended on us being there. It was very special those times. Christmas time has always been a special time. And all the family together. She's always loved the Christmas time. So we've had special things. She's always here when we've had illnesses or whatever. She's always been here to help us. In fact, she will be here this next week. And so those are all special things, times that we've had together. And mean a lot to me that we have that support from her. Well, she's loved, and she means the world to us, and we'd do anything for her. So, whether she asks or not, we'll be here for her. Kevin was premature, and when we went to the hospital, and he was born, back then, they didn't have the experience with preemies. The particular thing that he had wrong with him, they didn't have the experience with. And so there was nothing, basically they could do for him. When the baby is born, there's a valve in the heart. When they cut the cord, the baby takes a breath, that valve opens up and starts his breathing and the circulation of the blood to his heart. And that valve didn't open up. And so therefore, they couldn't do anything for him at that point in time. And he passed, and it was a shock. We were there, and Jamie's dad was out of town, and her mother was there, and it was just, a real tragic shock that we couldn't do anything about, And so we got a hold of our church people and moved forward. had a service for him, and her dad made a headstone out of wood that we had there for years. We just recently replaced it. But he has a spot with us. He's buried within a few yards of his grandparents, and he'll always be a part of our family, even though that he's not here. We had a lot of good friends that helped us through that. And that got us a little stronger in the church. Our bishop lived next door to our father-in-law, mother-in-law, or Jamie's folks. And he grew up, I knew him all my life, and him and his wife, and they were a big help to us, a very big help. And we got through it, but he's never forgotten. Well, Derek was born a couple of years after losing Kevin, and he was full term. Jamie had some problems, and they went in and took care of that, and he was full term. Great big bouncing boy, and we was glad to have him, and he was all boy, and he's been all boy all of his life. We went on a lot of camping trips and stuff, and he loved to camp, even when he was little. Our big project was cutting wood. He was 4 years old. He could split as much wood as a man. He learned how to split logs, learned how to load logs, and that was a weekend thing every weekend, was go cut wood with him and his granddad. When we lost his grandfather that he spent a lot of time cutting wood with and spent fishing and that with, he had a real tough time with that. He was a lot of fun. He loved to hunt. He loved to go fish. I rode the motorcycles, but he was a hard worker. He played football in high school, but he was always there. If there's work to be done, he was always there to help do the work. But he was fun-loving. He was fun to be around. He's fun to have around, and he's been a hard worker all of his life. He started out working young and working with his football coach. Far Pointer football coach was a little contractor doing concrete work and that, and Derek started getting into it with him and worked with him, and he just kept going, and he went on to school to be a structural engineer, and he got married, started having kids, and he got in the construction business. He worked for a couple of companies, and then he went to work for Suntech Concrete, setting forms and digging ditches and whatever, and he grew with the company. And he is what he is today because of the hard work that he learned when he was younger. He learned how to work and get along with people, and that, and he's done very well for himself. We're very proud of him and his accomplishments and what he's been able to do. He's done well in the church. He's been in the bishoprics and high councils and that, and he's done very well for himself. And he's well respected in the business that he's in today. He thinks more about other people than he does himself. And I think that's the reason that he's got along in the business that he is, because of the concerns he has for the people that he works with and that works for him. There's been several cases where they've had people injured or lost people on the job, that he goes directly himself to the families and talks to them and be sure that they're okay. And that's something that you don't always get. in these big companies, And so his personality and his compassion for others is what helped him grow and be what he is. He's very tender-hearted, and he's very special. Tell him that I'm very proud of him, his accomplishments, and what he's been able to do for himself and his family and for others, and for us as a family. And that he's loved. He's had some tough times in his life, and we've been able to help him through those. But we want him to know that he's loved, and we appreciate all that he does. Blaine's the baby, and Blaine was a preemie also. And Blaine had his first airplane ride when he was less than 24 years old, from Flagstaff to Phoenix. And he had the same problem that Kevin had with his heart. But by that time, they were able to have a procedure that they did, and so we flew him down to St. Joseph's Hospital. The doctors immediately took him in and took care of him. And the great big old doctor came out about 6'6", hands twice as big as mine, and I thought, how's he going to work on this baby? He says, well, we're going to do heart surgery, and the only thing I could think of was they're just going to cut him open and do heart surgery, but that's not what they had to do. They went up through his umbilical cord, up through the groin, and was able to go up and put a little drop of medicine by his heart, close the valve and open the other one. And he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And we was able to take him home. And he's grown ever since, been good ever since, done very well. Went through school, and went on a mission, got married, got 3 little girls, in the real estate business, and doing very well for himself. Growing up, he had all of his buddies that lived here, guys that he went to school with. This was the local hangout. And you never knew how many he was going to have on the floor in the morning when we get up, but this was the hangout. That was okay. We knew they were all here and they were safe and all behaving, so that was good. Well, him being the youngest, he missed out on a lot of things. And he didn't get involved in wood cutting and a lot of the camping trips that we had. But he's into sports. I coached his Little League and that when he was growing up, and we got involved in that. He played basketball. We did have a few fishing trips together, a few hunting trips together. He's very special to us. He needs to know that he's loved, and we care about him. And we care about his family and his girls, and we're here to support him in their endeavors and to help him in any way we can. But he needs to know that he's totally loved by his family. Well, I was working for Shamrock Foods Company, or Shamrock Dairy, and I was a supervisor in Flagstaff, and I got a call one day that my old boss decided to make a lateral move in the company. He was in charge of all the outside operations in the state. So I had a phone call one day to come to Phoenix to a meeting. And so I drove down to Phoenix to the meeting, and the meeting was about me. They called me down there to offer me his job. And that was in February, and of course the snow was 3 feet deep in Flagstaff. And I said, well, I got to go home and talk to my family about it first. And they said, that's fine, you do that and then let us know. So I drove back to Flagstaff and got home, and Jamie said, well, what was the meeting about? And I said, well, they want us to move to Phoenix. What? I said, yeah, we got to move to Phoenix. And she said, well, that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do. And I said, well, I told them, I said, you know, we couldn't move to Phoenix now because the snow was too deep. We couldn't sell the house. And they said that was not a problem, that we could sell the house whenever, but I had to go to Phoenix to go to work. So I went to Phoenix and started working in Phoenix, was in charge of all the outside areas in the state. Shamrock was started in 1922 in Tucson, Arizona, with Mr. Parker and Mr. McClellan with 10 cows and a wagon. And they were down there for several years, and then they expanded, built a plant here in Phoenix, 1952, and the company grew from there. And it was a good company to work for. It was a family-owned company. It's still family-owned today. It was, the employees were treated like family. Everybody knew Mr. McClellan and knew his son Norman McClellan, who was in charge of the Phoenix operation. And you were all treated like family. Different family company functions, with always family functions. And you just grew with the company. And today, Shamrock is the 5th largest distribution foods company in the United States, and still growing. It's still family owned. Working at Shamrock, you worked as a team in everything that you did. And the job that I had, I was responsible for several different things. Charge of all the outside operations in the state. So I was involved in the sales department, I was involved in the distribution department, and working closely with those department heads, and they all become very close friends. We've had some very good times together. I was at Shamrock for 39 years, and they were good years, but I was on the road a lot. I was gone 2 or 3, 4 days a week, because they covered the whole state. There's not a road in Arizona that I have not been down. And but it was good. They treated you well. Your benefits were good, and like I say, they treated you like family. As the company got bigger, it got to be more difficult because of more employees and the expansion. But it was still a good company to work for. Another thing with our camping, we go with a group. It used to be a large group of families, up to 100 people. Twice a year, conference camping. Everybody says, what is conference camping? And we go up in the mountains and set up a satellite dish. And the kids ride their quads and whatever. And we all gather. When the conference is on, everything shuts down, and we watch conference together. We have meals together, big family group gathering, meals, and watch conference. And we do that twice a year, and we've got a lot of mileage out of that, a lot of friendships out of that. But the group is getting smaller and smaller because the kids have all grown and moved on, and the families have split and gone different directions, and so, but we still go conference camping twice a year. This last year, I think we only had 4 families. So. But it's a neat experience. People say, well, conference camping, you go up there and have a good time and don't watch conference. But people say we get more out of conference up there, conference camping, than we do if we're home, because we get involved in other things. There, we shut everything down and everybody sits and watches conference. So it's been a good thing. It's something we really enjoy doing. Well, I was in the elders quorum presidency. I was in the high priest group leader. But I guess the most enjoyable callings I had was to help with the youth in their church treks. And I was on 4 different treks. As the backup support or whatever. And but those are real neat experiences with the youth to go out and be there and watch those kids on those treks. And it's not the most enjoyable thing. We've had some that were, by the time they got there, they wallowed in mud, muck until the time they left. And it's just, but it's neat to see how those kids go through that and how they grow because of that experience. So those have been my best, most fun experiences working with the youth and those colleagues. Girls' camps were a calling that me and a couple of my friends, 3 or 4 of my friends, had every year to go up and help with girls' camp, cook. And so it was, a couple of the guys were real jokesters, so it was all the time pulling pranks on people and that. And the girls just loved us to come and, you know, we'd pull pranks on them. They'd come down and wrap one year they come down and wrap the whole facility where we were staying in saran wrap. Got up in the morning, we couldn't open the doors, couldn't open the windows. The whole building had been wrapped in saran wrap. And so they got up, and then another time that friend's white truck, they decorated with Oreos. They covered his whole truck with Oreos. You know, just funny things that we did, but they loved to have the guys come, and we always did a skit for them when we got there. But the girls loved us to come to girls' camp, so, and we did that for several years. Well, yeah, the girls, just my mannerism, I guess. I was just kind of rough and gruff, and they were scared to death. If I barked, I mean, they scared them to death. But they found out that I did have a tender spot, and loved them all. And so by the time camps were over, they were all friendly, and we got along fine. But at first, yeah, they were scared of me. When Blaine decided to go on a mission, we had not gone through the temple. Jamie and I had not been through the temple. And so she said, she said, I'm going to go through the temple with Blaine before he goes on his mission, with or without you. So things that you've got to change to be able to go through the temple, you need to get done. So we went to work on it and got the okay to go to the temple. So we went to the temple with Blaine for him to get his endowments. We went through and got our endowments, and then we got sealed as a family the same day. So that was a very special time, very special experience for us. The kids, and growing up in the church, had learned about families forever, and we had talked about it, but we just hadn't done it. And so it was a very special experience for us. Her son-in-law stood in for Kevin, and so he was sealed as our family. But it was a very, very neat experience for us because all of our friends around that had been through the temple were there, and our bishoprics were there, and the stake president was there, and it was a very, very special day for us. Being a grandpa is a whole different thing. So you have a big variety of personalities and whatever, but it's really neat to have the grandkids and be able to spoil them and go and watch them do their different things, ball games and that as they've grown up. We fortunately was able to go to North Carolina and watch Kim's boys grow be in sports and whatever, and been here with Derek and his kids, girls in cheer and boys in sports. Blaine and his girls are all in dance. And we love to go and watch them and be a part of their lives, and to be able to support them in whatever way we can. And they've basically all of them have gone through school or going to school. Some of them are married, some of them are not. So that makes it interesting. And, but they're all doing well, and we're proud to be grandparents. So basically, the things that I learned growing up, that you get what you work for. And if you work hard, and you do have jobs, you do good at your jobs, and you're honest about your work, that you will grow and advance in whatever you do. And life will be a whole lot better for you. So hard work is the key to about everything. You got to work hard for what you have. Our grandkids are all loved. We love them individually, and we love them as a group. And we appreciate all the things that they do for us. And we're grateful that we're here to help them in any way that we can. But they need to know that they're totally loved by their grandparents. Well, we decided that after we were retired that we would like to serve on some service missions in the church. So we bought a fifth-wheel trailer because the places we wanted to go, you had to supply your own living facilities. And we bought that trailer, and I retired, and Jamie was still working. And the stake president called one Sunday after church and wanted to know if he could come over and visit with us. And I thought, well, what have I done? Because I had been the high priest group leader for about 6 months, and I thought, I said something to somebody that didn't sit well. So he's coming over to talk to me about it. So anyway, he came over and he said, well, I'm not here on an official call, but are you still planning on going on a mission? And we said, yeah, when Jamie retires, here's what we want to do. And he said, would you be interested, or could you serve a mission at Adamon-Diamond? I said, what? He said, could you serve a mission at Adamon-Diamond? And I said, well, I don't know. And they said, well, your name has been put in, and I'm here to see if you could go serve a mission at Adamon-Diamond. So we went on to dinner and talked to Derek and his wife, told him, and said, we just had this conversation with the stake president. What do you think about it? And he said, what are you waiting for? Well, your mother, I'm retired, your mother's still working. So we got to cross those hurdles, and we've got a lot to do to work this out. And he said, well, I don't know why you can't do it. So that's the start of it. And so we met with the other two kids and let them know what was going on, and they said, no reason you can't go. So, and we had to figure out what was going to do with the house, and that while we were gone. And we got that worked out where Blaine and his wife, daughter, could move in here and live in this house while we were gone. So that worked out. When we got our mission call to go to Adamon-Diamond, I was not here. I was up on the North Kaibab hunting with some friends out of telephone range. So the letter came, and she called Derek and asked Derek, what should I do? You know, your dad's not here. And he said, well, open it. So she went ahead and opened it, and then she tried to call me, and she tried for 2 days and couldn't get a hold of me. And so one morning we were coming down off of the north end of the mountain, kind of on the west side, looking up toward the white cliffs and the red cliffs, and down at the base of those cliffs is Kanab. And I thought, oh, I got phone reception. I guess I better call Jamie. So I called her, and I said, "You've been calling, looks like, for 2 or 3 days. What do you want?" She said, "Well, I've been trying to call and tell you we got your mission call." I said, "Oh, really? Read it to me." So she did. But it was really neat standing, looking to the north, looking at those red cliffs and white cliffs, knowing that my grandparents, great-grandparents had settled that area, and getting a call to go serve at Dynamite. So that was a very neat experience, very, very spiritual experience for me to be standing there and get that call. So that was a special time. And we left, got our stuff together and left, and went to Dynamite for a year and a half. When we first got there, my first project was working on the roads. My second project was the white fences hadn't been painted in 3 years. And so the director said that he was going to go to town and get wire brushes and scrapers, and we could start scraping fence posts and getting them ready to paint. And I said, "No, we're not doing that." I said, "We got a power washer, so we're going to figure out how to use that." So I figured out a way to get that done. So I got to power wash all the fence posts and fences. I got that all done, and then I got to paint them all. 3,397 fence posts, plus the gates and the straight fence, board fence that was there. So I got to, that was another project that I had. We'd use a spray gun, so we sprayed them. And, but I can remember coming in for lunch and having icicles dripping off of my hat. That's how cold it was when we was power washing the fences. So, but anyway, that mission was a great experience for us. We did road projects, rebuilt the roads. We did a logging project that had never been logged before. And one of the missionaries there was retired from the Forest Service, so he knew all about trees. And he said, "There's trees here that are going to die and not be good for anything if we don't get them logged." So we talked to the general authorities that came out to visit with us, and they went back, got permission for us to do a logging project. And we hired a little local guy there that had a logging business, and we started logging. Got in touch with some lumber mills around, and they come and bought the logs. And money went back into our fund there. And during that process, now President Nelson, who was Elder Nelson at the time, and his wife Wendy came out and took them on a tour, and was talking about the logging project. It's totally a service mission. There's no missionary. There was 12 missionary couples, and it's nothing but a service, maintain and beautify the property. We did no proselyting. It was just build fence, mow grass, do whatever had to be done, work on the water system, take care of the berms and that, where the farmers, the land, the church leases the land of some farmers, and they grow corn or soybeans or hay, run some cattle on there, so we had to maintain all the property for them. There's all kinds of, every day is a different spiritual experience. The spirit is so strong there. When we first got there, we had stayed in Kansas City the night before, and we had a report time at 11 o'clock. And so we drove up there and went through this little town of Gallatin and went out 3 or 4 miles and then made a turn on the road up through the country. And I told Jamie, I said, I don't know where we're going, what this is taking us to, but this don't look good to me. About 15 miles up the road, there's a sign that says Adamondi Almond. And the minute you turn off that road, highway, and turn onto that property, the Spirit just overwhelms you. And you know that that's where you need to be. It's a beautiful place. The roads are all lined with white fences, were at that time. And so it was set apart from all the other land that is around there. It was totally unbelievable. And so our job was to maintain and beautify it, the roads and all the things, buildings and everything that was there. So that was our job. We did have callings in the church, a little branch up there where the missionaries basically ran the branch, other than the bishop. All the teachers were all missionaries. We all had classes that we taught and worked the little branch there. But other than that, it was just labor, but it was a very enjoyable labor. You enjoyed every bit of it, and the hard work you didn't mind. It was there, a very spiritual place, and there's very spiritual spots on there that you can go and feel the Spirit. Most people don't get to go there because they've had to fence them off so that you can't get into them. But one particular spot that's impressed me is there's a great big red rock in the middle of the township of where Adamondi Almond would be. And about 10 feet from that rock, there's a survey stake. And that survey stake is the center of the United States. So Adamondi Almond is located in the center of the United States. And so that you go down there and it really hits you when you go there and see that, to think that you're standing in the middle of Adamondi Almond and you're standing in the middle of the United States. So in Preacher's Rock, you can stand on that and talk across that valley, big valley, and in a normal voice, and somebody on the other side of the valley can hear you. It's a very, very special place. Then we've had some very special people come and visit us while we were there. We'd been there 6 months. I got called to be the director of the mission. And our direct reports were Grim Doxey, who was a general authority, and Joe J. Christensen, who was a general authority. And Grim Doxey was called by President Kimball to go out to Adamondi Almond originally with H. Berg Peterson to survey the land out there and see what had to be done to create the township of Adamondi Almond. And those two gentlemen are the ones that were our direct report, and our mission president was President Monson. So everything reported right directly back to him. There was a daily sheet made out of all the work that was done every day and compiled by a monthly report and sent to him. And it's amazing. You'd think he's a busy man. That report would just go there and go in a drawer or whatever, but there was numerous times that we'd get a call and say he wants to know more about a particular thing. So he did read the reports. So that was pretty special, So I'd still be there if they had let us stay. I loved it back there, and I loved what we were doing. When serving at Adamondi Almond, we had two general authorities, Grim Doxey and Joe J. Christensen, that used to alternate coming out They come up once a month and spend up to a week with us. They always come, when they came the first day that they were there, they always had dinner with Jamie and I, and we went through everything that was going on, or if we had any issues or problems with any missionaries. They didn't want you to handle it, they wanted to handle it themselves. And so we'd always discuss that, but it was very, very spiritual and very uplifting to have them come and sit at your table and be in your home and spend an evening with you. And then they would spend time with each one of the individual missionaries and their wives while they were there. But they always knew what was going on. We kept them up to date, and any issues or problems that we had, they took care of it. We didn't have to handle that. And we had one particular missionary that we had to leave the mission. We had an opportunity for him to go to Nauvoo, and Elder Doxey was there, and we talked about it, and he said, then you make the call. And so we called and talked to the people in Nauvoo, and they said, absolutely, we'd love to have him, because he was a specialty carpenter, and they needed help out there in some carpentry work. And so the next morning, after a prayer meeting, Elder Doxey says, well, you need to call him in and make the call. I said, well, I thought you were going to do it. He said, no, this is your job. You're going to make the call to him. So we called this missionary and his wife in and told them what was going on, and if they had an opportunity, if they would accept it, that they could go to Nauvoo and finish their mission, which they accepted and went. It worked out very well. It relieved the tension in our mission, and things worked out very well from there. And Elder Christensen, when the month that he came, he was one of these guys that wanted to be a part of everything that was going on. So when we got new missionaries, we told them, they said, well, when Elder Christensen comes, he'll take you down to the woodshed for a day. What do you mean? I said, well, take you down to the woodshed, and he's going to work you out, see what kind of missionaries you are, and he'll be right there along with you. And he did. He'd go down to the woodshed, and they'd split wood all day, stack it in the shed, because that's what we used to heat the facilities there with, was a great big stove. So we had to cut the wood and split it and have it on hand. But he would go down there every time he came out. We had new missionaries. He'd spend a day down at the woodshed with them. So that was kind of a laughing joke that we had around there. Well, if you don't behave, Elder Christensen will take you back down to the woodshed. So it was very good and very spiritual to have them be a part of the mission and be with us each month. The wood that we cut, there was, like we said before, the facilities had never been logged, and there was a lot of dead trees. And so it was all the time thinning trees, cutting out trees, and that. And then when we started the logging operation, we had all the slash from the logging trees that had to be taken care of. So that was cut up and brought in and put in the shed so that we'd have wood for the winter. Since then, they have put in new facilities, and they still cut wood, but that wood's donated to families in the area that's needed back there. And so they still have the woodshed, and they still go through that routine, but that wood is given to families that are needed now instead of using it there in the facility. The temple, when they built the Phoenix Temple, we were called to be part of the setup for the open house of the temple. And we worked on that. A lot of hours and hard work put in on that. But that was a very spiritual experience to be there and watch people come and go through the temple and see their expressions before they went and after they got out of the temple, how they felt about the spiritual experiences that they had in there. And that was a neat experience. And since then, we've been temple workers. We work at the temple every week. And that's a neat experience to go and help people go through the temple and see their experience, see their joy for being there, and how they feel about being in the temple. It's a very special thing to help people to go through the temple. So when people come and you don't know why they're there, other than they've come to the temple to do work for somebody else, or there for themselves, for the spirit that's there to get relief from help from problems that they're having or whatever. And it's neat to see, you work in an initiatory and you go through that, and people come out and they thank you for being there and being able to help them to get through that. And you work at the veil, and people come through the veil, and you can tell when they're on the other side how they're doing, and some of them are having trouble, and the thoughts and the thanks that you get for being there and helping. They truly love that. And the friendships that you make working in the temple is great. We've got a lot of good friends and people that we can visit with and talk to and become acquainted with and associate with outside of the temple, and that's good experience, and we love that. So it's working at the temple is a blessing, really. I guess I have a good testimony of the gospel. My testimony grew tremendously while I was serving my mission at Diamond. And we've been blessed with many blessings, and those blessings come from living the gospel and going to church and being involved in our church things and doing our studying. And our testimony grows more and more every day. As we work at the temple, it helps us with our testimony. And we know that our Savior lives, and one day that we'll all be back together again as an eternal family because of those teachings and living the gospel the way we should. I know the Savior lives. He died on the cross for us so that we be redeemed of all of our sins and be blessed with the things that we needed to be blessed with, as long as we lived and did the things in the gospel that we're supposed to do. Joseph Smith was a very, very special young man, having served at Diamond and being there where he walked on those grounds and learned about the things that he did in that area. It's very special to have a part of him in our lives because of what he did. If it wasn't for what he did, we wouldn't be where we are today in the church. We may not even have the church that we have today if it hadn't been for him and the things that he did and the teachings that he had and the trials that he went through that teaches us today what we need to do. Well, the Book of Mormon is the Word of God, and it is transcribed in it another testament of the Bible. So as long as we read that and know that that is our church teachings, is the Book of Mormon, then we should be able to go and do the things that we're supposed to do as long as we study that and know that that is the Word of God. Well, Blaine and his friends, this was the hangout for them, and that was good because we always knew where they were at. They were good friends. They were always friendly. It was ironic that some of the parents would call and say, "Have you seen our boy?" because they'd been gone for 2 or 3 days, and they figured it's time for them to come home. You know, they've been here and lived here, you know. We get up in the morning, we never knew how many would be on the floor or what, you know, but they'd play ball until wee hours of the morning, get in the pool till wee hours of the morning, and come in and watch movies, but they were always here, and they were a good group of boys. In fact, they all went on missions with the exception of one. It was not he was non-member, but all of his other friends went on missions. And so it was a good group of boys to have and have around the house. First year that we moved here at this house, I decided that we would put in a garden. And I borrowed a rototiller from a guy I knew and went out and started to till the garden. Well, the ground was so hard that I had to put the boys on the front of the tiller in a rainstorm to try to get the ground tilted. And it took us forever to get ground tilted enough to where we could plant a garden. The first year the garden didn't do well at all. Then I started hauling in mulch and manure and sand, and every year since then, practically I've hauled in either manure or mulch and put in that garden. And but it's a relief thing. Used to be when I come home from work, I could go out and work in the garden, work off my tensions a little bit, talk to the plants and watch them grow, and it was a relaxation. And it was a fun thing to do, to have the kids come and help pick and to can and that. So it's kind of become a family thing. It's something that we enjoy doing, I enjoy doing, and the neighbors really enjoy us having a garden because we give a lot of the stuff to the neighbors. So it's a relief thing, and it's just a real pleasure to work and do the things that my granddad taught me how to do, grow in the garden. So it's a big thing for us. Yeah, we were in Utah camping when COVID-20 hit. And we were up in the mountains with some friends. We went up there to get away from the influx of people and being around people, so we went up in the mountains with them. And one of our friends had this bad cough. And we kept telling him, Bill, we need to take you to town and get you checked. I think you got COVID. No. I've had this cough for 2 or 3 weeks. I'll be all right. I'm getting over it, But he just kept getting worse. So Jamie, being asthmatic, we had her breathing machine and stuff with us, so we gave him some breathing treatments and that, but he just kept getting worse. And finally one morning, Jamie said, I don't feel good. I don't think I got a fever. So we checked her, and she did have a fever, and I said, well, I would need to take you to town and get you checked. You got something. So we were in the process of hooking up the trailers, and I was just going to take her to town. Everybody else decided, well, we'll all go to town. So I have a special way I go about doing my things, but other guys was helping me, and we backed the truck under the trailer, and somebody had pulled the chalk blocks out from behind the trailer, and the truck started to roll with the trailer, and Jamie tried to get in to stop it, and I had her get out of the way, and she fell out of the truck out of the way, and the truck run over her foot. And so here we are, now her with the mashed foot. We're still trying to get things done, and we got her hit ice on her foot. It's turning black and blue and swelling. We give her a blessing, and I headed off the mountain with her and got her to the hospital, and they checked her out. They checked her foot, but they wouldn't give her a COVID test. So we waited. 2 days later, we went up, give her a test, and she had COVID. So we just left the trailer there, packed up our stuff, and came home. One of the other couples, they went to St. George to get tested for COVID, found out he had COVID. Bill, the guy that was coughing, he got tested, he had COVID. The other guy's wife had COVID. Wound up, we lost the one guy in the hospital with COVID. But we were down with COVID for 3 months. And I wound up in the hospital dehydrated with COVID. But fortunately, we got over it and got through it. Thought we were in good shape, but we kept. Next year come around, we got COVID again. We got through that. Wasn't as bad that time. And unfortunately, Jamie, 3 weeks ago, took our youngest son and his girls to St. George to go through the St. George Open Temple, and came home, and 3 days later she came down with COVID. So she's had 3 bouts of COVID. I've had 2, and hopefully we don't have any more COVID. But the first COVID we had was really bad. Growing up in elementary school, during recess, that was one of our big activities, is to have marble games. And I got to be quite good at marbles, and I got a lot of marbles. We got some steelies, which is bearings out of big ball bearings. And not everybody had those steelies, but if you had a steely, then you could do pretty good about stealing other guys' marbles. So I still have the marbles that I had back in elementary school today. And so I have my marbles, and I haven't lost all of them yet. We moved Jamie's sister Joanne to Oregon, and that was quite an experience. We had the old red truck, the camper on it, and a car, and we drove from here to Las Vegas. We got to Las Vegas, and the clutch went out in the truck, and so I had to teach my son-in-law how to drive my old red truck without a clutch. And this was at 10 o'clock at night, and we went and picked the U-Haul truck up with all of her belongings, her little car on behind, and away we went. Drove all night across the Nevada desert. Finally, we got up to a town, and we said, okay, we've had enough, we got to stop. So we stopped, got a room, and slept for a little while, got back in the truck, and away we go. And the gas gauge on that truck didn't work very good. And we got on the freeway and started up the freeway, and the U-Haul truck ran out of gas. So I had an extra tank on my pickup, so we siphoned the gas out of the truck, out of my pickup, in a tea kettle pot, and made a funnel out of a paper cup and poured in the U-Haul truck. That was quite an experience. Finally got the truck started, and away we went. We got on up into Reno, stayed overnight, next morning got up and went down and found a dealership, put a new clutch in the truck, pickup, and we went on to Oregon. And we got up in the middle of Idaho, stopped to have lunch, and got back in the vehicles, and I went one way and they went another, and we were separated. We didn't have telephones. We had CB radios, but up in the mountains they didn't work. So for half a day, we didn't know where anybody was at. They got over to the freeway before I did, and they were talking to truckers on the freeway on the CB radio. Have you seen this U-Haul truck? And they said, oh, well, there's all kinds of U-Haul trucks. No, we haven't seen them. And we're going along, and all of a sudden, there we were. They were up on top of an overpass, and I went over the underpass. And So they turned around, and we finally caught up with one another about 50 miles up the road at a big rest area. So that was quite an experience. We didn't know where we were going or who was going where, but we got to Oregon and got her taken care of, got the trucks unloaded, and got her moved into her place. But that was quite an experience. When 9/11 happened, I was on my way from Phoenix to Kingman, Arizona. And I had the radio on, and I got to Wickenburg and stopped at the Bash's Market there, which I had to take care of, and asked them if they knew what was going on, and they said no. And I said, well, 2 airplanes had crashed into the towers in New York. So the manager there went next door to a little store there that had TVs, and got a TV and plugged it in and put the antennas up, and they started watching the TV. I went about my work, and then I listened to it on the radio in the car all the way to Kingman. I checked in the motel in Kingman early, and then I sat and watched what was going on for the rest of the afternoon, and it was just unbelievable to see what was going on, and the whole area was in a turmoil from that point on. It was just like people just couldn't believe what was happening, and so it was a major thing. It affected everybody and around the world, but it was a very traumatic thing to see that happen, and thinking that we could be in a world war right here in our own country. Christmas time was a special time of year for us. Jamie's mom was really into Christmas, and we'd go out every year and cut our Christmas trees. And back then it was flocking, so it didn't matter how cold it was, you had to flock a Christmas tree. So I got into the flocking of Christmas trees, and we flocked everybody's trees until Jamie had asthma real bad. She worked at the doctor for a doctor, and called him to the house one night to give her a shot because she was having asthma. And he come to the house and saw that Christmas tree, flocked Christmas tree in the house, and he said, now take that out in the front yard and never put another one in the house, and she'll be a whole lot better. So the Christmas tree left, and we never had another flocked tree in the house. That was the end of the flocking. Kids had pets. Kim wanted a dog, and I had to make a trip to Phoenix with the ice cream truck. And so I came down, and while I was down here, I made some phone calls, and I found a dog for her. And so when I got back to Flagstaff that afternoon, I drove to the house, and she was there, came out, and I said, well, I got something for you. She said, what do you got? Ice cream? I said, no, I don't have any ice cream. But come around to the side of the truck. So I had the dog in the front seat in the box. And I got up in there and got the box out and handed her the box. And that dog is loved from that point on. She had it in her buggy. She had it in the wagon. And that was her pet. And she totally loved that little dog. We replaced him with another dog, almost identical to the one that she had, and that became the family dog. And he was a redneck dog. Every time we'd go out in the woods, well, he'd hang around until we got ready to leave, and then we couldn't find him. And invariably, he got in with a skunk or something, so we had to deal with that every time we went out. But he was a good dog. And, made a trip to Utah one time, and he was in the truck with us in the back. And he always rode in the back. And we got up north of Flagstaff a little ways, going up the hill, and all of a sudden that dog jumped out, saw a deer, and he just jumped out of the truck and went over heels and out through the woods he went. So we had to stop and chase him, and finally caught up with him. He was all right, put him back in the truck. He never did jump out of the truck again. But they always had a dog. The dogs that we had were purebred beagles. Came from a very good bloodline. They're beautiful dogs. But we thoroughly enjoyed those dogs. Kim named her dog Sambo. And then our next dog was the family dog, and his name was Sundance Gareen, and so we just called him Sonny. And we had him until he passed away. And my youngest son found a dog wandering in the neighborhood, a little puppy, and we never did find the owners of that dog. He was a cross between a terrier and a poodle. Beautiful dog, and we had it until we one day took it down, had it all cleaned and trimmed and shampooed, and come back, and the gate got open, and the dog left, and we never did find that dog. So that was the end of the family dogs at that point in time. Well, when we moved from Flagstaff to Phoenix, I looked for 2 or 3 months for a house and had a hard time finding a house. And I finally located a house over at 43rd Avenue in Cactus. And so I called Jamie and had her come down and look at it, and we decided that was the house that we could get by with. And it was a nice home. It was in a cul-de-sac, but with no yard, hardly any backyard, a little bit of front yard, and it was all rock. They had rocked it, and so we moved into that house and started to work cleaning out the rock in the yard. Told the neighbors they could have the rock if they'd come and rake it off the yard and haul it across the street. So they did that, and we planted the front yard, and then we decided we had to have a pool, and so we put the pool in. So when we got through putting the pool in, we had grass in the back about 15 by 20. That was our backyard. And the property around us, the university had bought land north of us, big chunk of land, and they were getting ready to start to develop that and build the extension of the university over there. So people started putting their houses up for sale, and we decided that we needed to find a place where we could. I didn't have any place to park my truck, my camper, and all of that, and so we decided to start looking for a place. So we came. This neighborhood here was just being started. And we come over here and looked, and they said, well, we have lots down the street. So we looked, and we bought a lot, and was going to build a house on that. And Josette, the realtor here, called and asked us to come and talk to her. And so we did, and she said, we know you like this house and they're getting ready to sell it, so make an offer on it. And we said, well, we can't afford this. And she said, no, make an offer on it. So we went back and talked about it, made an offer, and they countered our offer, and then we countered it with another offer to do some things, and they said they would do that. And they give us 30 days to sell our house. And so they said, well, man. So we called the realtor that we had bought the house through, and she came out and looked at it. Of course, we put in the pool, and we'd done a bunch of other things to it. The houses across the street, it was for sale, and it had been for sale for quite some time. And I said, I don't know how you're going to sell this in 30 days. And she said, I'll get it sold. And she wound up selling that house in 7 days. So we packed up and we've been moved out here, and we've been here almost 39 years. So same place. And we've made some improvements here, remodeled and done some things, but this is where we'll be until they throw us over the fence. So. Well, this shop is my hangout. I do my gardening, and we come in here and we line up all the stuff on the workbench, wash it, clean it, can it. This is where all that's taken care of. So this is my hangout. When I'm doing stuff, this is, usually I have 2 chairs, so if I have company come, the guy can sit there and sit here, and we can sit here and visit. I've had friends come over and spend a half a day. We'll just sit here and reminisce and talk about things, and it's been real good. The stuff up on the wall, there's my old sled. I got that when I was 13 years old, and still have it, and had a lot of fun on that. Ice skates, we used to skate on the ice when it'd get cold enough to make ice. The deer horns up there was just horns off of a buck we got deer hunting. One horn up there is off of out of the field at Adam on Diamond. The saw came from back in North Carolina. Jamie saw that and bought it, and we shipped it out here to hang on the wall. Reminds us of the old time wood cutting. The bridle and pin up there are Jamie's dad's bridle and pin. That pin came from down at Patagonia, down at the army camp down there. That's what they used to drive in the ground and tie their horses to at night so that they'd stay there where they were at. That pin came from there. And the plane and drill press and stuff. The plane came from my grandfather. Drill press came from a friend of mine, had it and said, I don't know what I'll do with it. And I said, well, that's an old time antique, so I took it. The water bags that's hanging up down there, desert water bags, that's when you travel. Back in the day, you didn't have canteens and air conditioning and all of that, so you filled those water bags full of water, hung them on the rearview mirror or on the bumper of the car. As you drove down the road, the air would blow on them and cool them. So you got out, you had a cold drink of water. And a lot of people don't know what those are, or never seen a water bag like that. The helmet that's hanging there is my dad's old helmet. When he worked in the Glen Canyon Dam, when they first started that, digging the tunnels, that's the helmet that he wore. That felt hat up there is his old felt hat. The pick there was a pick of my granddad's. They did some, not real mining, but they did some put out claims and that. And that's his pick and rake, and his big old hoe down there was his hoe. The light fixture that's hanging there on the wall came off of our house. I rewired and put in a new big light, heavy-duty light fixture, but that's the old type that has you open the door there, you'll see it has the round fuses in it. Fuses used to blow, so they'd take it out and put a penny behind it so that it would still work. And one day I said, you know, we're going to burn the old house down up here if we don't get that thing off, so we tore it off and put a new great big panel on the house that had separate fuses and that. The chalkboard there's the name there's the house is on the folks' house. The little tool thing there, I wish I'd had that when the kids was growing up and using my tools. And didn't get back, but that just tells people, you know, tools are here and just don't bother them. Tools all hanging on the other side. Some of those tools were my dad's. We had a burglar here once, and they pretty well cleaned me out on my dad's tools, but Big old drill press there on the workbench was his. The big grinder was his, and of course the rest of this conglomeration in here is stuff that I've accumulated over 50 years. So, but this is my hangout. So the things that I do here, work on, and like I said earlier, this is kind of our garden shop when we start gardening in the summer. So I spend quite a bit of time out here. This is where I work on my Christmas lights. When it gets time to put lights up, as I spend hours out here testing the lights and getting ready to put those up, which we're in the process of doing today. So this is kind of my hangout. I love to tinker and work on things. The grandkids said, well, if it's broke, Grandpa can fix it. So they would always bring their toys or what over here. And we've made cars for the Pinewood Derby. We've made a lot of Pinewood Derby cars here. And so they like to come and talk about this shop and the things that's in here and have me tell them what it is. So it's kind of a family hangout spot when the boys are here. Okay, this is a board of brands. As the missionaries came to Adam-on-Diamond, if they didn't have what they call a family brand or a brand that was identifiable, then we made branding irons for everybody. And of course, this is the board that I had everybody brand while I was the director there before we left. And the first one here is Elder Christensen's brand to Joe Christensen for him and his wife. This one here is, you can look at it, and what is that? That's 2 ice cream cones. And everybody says, well, what is the ice cream cone? Well, that's my brand, W Lazy V. This brand here is C to me, Charlie Merle and his wife, the 2 of them. And this brand here is a D.A., Dennis Allen. And Dennis was a very special missionary. He was very talented. His father was a wheelwright and a wainwright, a millwright, and spent a lot of time at Adam-on-Diamond. And he did a lot of blacksmith work while he was there. We also traveled to Nauvoo with Dennis on a mini mission with him and his wife, and went and repaired wagons 2 different times at Nauvoo because of his talents of being a wheelwright and a wainwright and a blacksmith. There's a lot of parts on those wagons that they had to be made by hand. So we take the wagons apart, totally clean them up, replace the parts that were broken, put them back together, and it was quite a labor to do that. And so that's a very special brand to me. Rocking 9, one of the missionaries there had 9 kids, and that's their brand. Frank Madsen, his brand. This one is John Grimm, Rocking John Grimm. This one is the Diamond with Lloyd and Donna's Price. This is the Carvers XV. That was their family brand. It was been handed down. They've been in the family for years. This is Lance Bybee, Standing B, the Lazy L. Brad Westover. Rockin' G is Green, one of the other missionaries. So it was quite a feat to have them make these brands for everybody and be able to brand this and bring it home with us. There's a big plank in the shop there where all the brands that have been made over the years for the missionaries, they all brand that big log. So their brands are all there at Adam-on-Diamond while after they leave, their brands are there. This is the wheelbarrow that my granddad used up in Kanab when they built the Kanab Dam. As you can see that it's been well used and that, but they didn't have the mechanized stuff that we have today to pour concrete, and everything was done with wheelbarrows. So this is his old wheelbarrow that I've had, and we'll get it redone one of these days. And you look at that and think about what Derek is doing with his life and his company, the big buildings that they use, the high-rise buildings, the big warehouse buildings that they use, and pour thousands of yards of concrete a day, and thinking of the ancestors mixed it all in a wheelbarrow. So this has a little bit of meaning to the family, the mix of the tie between the great-grandfather and my son and the business that he's in today. But it's an antique, and we're part of the family, so we're glad we've got it. Well, life overall has been very good. I've been very blessed. We've had our ups and downs like everybody does. But overall, I can't complain about my life. I've been very blessed with friends, family, work, our accomplishments, the things that we do, the things that we're able to do. And so I really don't have any qualms about my life. I think I've had a pretty good life and thankful for what I have.